Hello, and welcome everybody to this little snippet of the show where we are going to be conducting an interview. My name is Roxana Martinez. I'm part of the Inform team, as is Jacqueline, who will be helping to translate our current interview with Dr. Julia Kohler for this episode of Informed. Again, since our topic for this week's episode is COVID, we thought it would be really great to bring back a person who is very familiar with the topic and is very familiar with the field in general. Dr. Julia Koehler is also an associate physician of pediatrics in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Boston Children's Hospital, and she is also assistant professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School.
Buenas noches, gracias por estar con nosotros esta noche. Mi nombre es Jacqueline y esta noche tenemos como invitada a la doctora Julia Koehler. Ella ha estado en nuestro programa ya antes, pero como estamos hablando sobre el tema del COVID, este episodio queríamos tenerla a ella de nuevo para que nos ayude a hablar un poco de esto. Julia Koehler es una médica asociada de pediatría en la División de Enfermedades Infecciosas en Boston Children's Hospital y es profesora asistente de pediatría en la Escuela Médica de Harvard, quien habla independientemente de su empleador.
Sounds good. And thank you again so much, Julia, for coming with us and being on the show tonight.
Thank you so very much, Roxana. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It's my pleasure and great honor to join you again on Inform.
Again, since the last time you were on the show with us, obviously things have changed quite a bit. That was about September, a couple months after the first initial wave, especially in the United States. And so things have changed quite a bit since September, obviously. There's been there have been two approved vaccines by Pfizer and Moderna that have been approved recently and have actually now started to roll out and people are starting to take. So I guess my first question for my first question today was just, what is your personal experience with the vaccine so far? If you've, I know that I believe I've been told that you've already taken your first dosage of the vaccine. And so I just wanted to, see with you like what that experience was like and how that was for you.
Pues hace un tiempo que la tuvimos en nuestro show, fue en septiembre, a unos meses después de la primera ola de coronavirus. Y esta vez queremos hablar de nuevo sobre el tema y según sabemos, usted tiene un poco de experiencia personal con la vacuna y queríamos que nos comentara un poco más al respecto.
Thank you so much. And just as a preface, I do speak for myself, not for my employer, but I am an infectious disease specialist. And so, yes, I did take the vaccine. That was about 10 days ago. I expected to be tired, have a headache, maybe a fever, my arm would hurt, all that. Those were my expectations. So I put it at the end of a work stint that I had that is very intense, and I didn't want to, have a foggy brain as I'm caring for my patients. And I was really surprised because I felt nothing. Like I have to take the flu vaccine every year as well, and I do, and I'm glad to get it, but my arm tends to be sore, and this time I didn't feel like, okay, it was a little bit sore maybe for a day. I didn't feel anything.
Right.
So that's my very personal experience. And I'm looking forward to my second dose 3 weeks later. So that's coming up in another about 10 days or so.
Quiero hablar por mí misma, no estoy hablando de parte de mi empleador. Y mi experiencia personal, pues yo esperaba tener un poco de fiebre, estar cansada, tener dolor de cuerpo, pero me sorprendió cuando no sentí nada. Ya tuve mi primer dosis de la vacuna y no tuve más que un poco de dolor en el brazo por unos días. Normalmente, bueno, yo tomo la vacuna de influenza cada año y experimento un poco de dolor de brazo por unos días después de tomar la vacuna. Y me sorprendió que con la vacuna para el coronavirus fue tal vez un día que sentí un poco de molestar, pero después de eso no sentí nada, me sentí muy bien y estoy esperando recibir la segunda dosis en 3 semanas.
Just to ease some of the skepticism that people might have regarding the vaccine, if you could tell us, like specifically like what is in the vaccine, or if you could dispel some of the myths that are surrounding it that people might have.
Mhm.
Em, Desde que sabemos de que hay una vacuna para el coronavirus, se ha, eh, se ha llegado este poco de desinformación sobre lo que contiene la vacuna y nos estamos preguntando si tiene si nos podría explicar un poco más sobre lo que la vacuna contiene y todo eso, todo el respecto que usted sepa sobre la vacuna.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, so the vaccine contains a kind of genetic information in a form called RNA or messenger RNA. The RNA is like a piece of genetic instruction, and that is wrapped in some fat just to help it get into our cells. And then once that fat kind of goes into our cells and brings along the genetic information or the RNA, then our cells can start making that protein. And then they recognize that this is something they need to be fighting off, and they learn how to fight it off. So that when this is just one little piece of the virus, but it's an important piece, so that when they encounter the actual virus, or if they encounter the actual virus, they're ready to fight it off.
Prácticamente lo que la vacuna del coronavirus contiene es información genética en forma de ARN que está envuelta en músculo grasoso que lo ayuda a entrar al cuerpo, que luego cuando está dentro del cuerpo produce una proteína que es una pequeña pieza que asimila al coronavirus. Cuando esta pequeña pieza, esta pequeña parte ya está dentro del cuerpo, el cuerpo aprende a atacarla y de alguna manera estar preparado para cuando el coronavirus en realidad esté dentro.
There are many pieces of misinformation that are spreading on WhatsApp, YouTube, etc. And I'm just going to mention a few. One of them is that you can get COVID from this vaccine. That is not possible because there's just one little piece out of many that make up this virus. So there is no virus there. It's just the instructions to make one little piece of it. So you cannot get COVID from this vaccine. The second is that you might become like genetically changed or genetically modified from this vaccine. That is also not the case because RNA is the last downstream kind of step of genetic modification, or sorry, genetic instruction or information. And it is actually very easily destroyed. It is very unstable, which is why the vaccines have to be kept at such low temperatures because RNA goes bad so quickly. So in other words, you cannot become genetically modified from this vaccine in any way, shape, or form. That's just totally not possible.
He escuchado un poco de desinformación en las redes sociales como WhatsApp y YouTube sobre el coronavirus y la vacuna del coronavirus y solo quiero mencionar algunas y desmentirlas. La primera es que cuando te vacunas también recibes COVID. Esto es falso, ya que la vacuna lo único que contiene es información, bueno, son las instrucciones para hacer una pequeña pieza de la completa estructura de COVID, lo cual significa que no te da COVID, sino fabrica una pequeña pieza dentro de tu cuerpo para que tu cuerpo sepa cómo lucharlo en el futuro. La segunda que he escuchado, el segundo mito, es que la vacuna hace que las personas sean afectadas genéticamente, lo cual es falso también. El ARN es fácil de destruir. inestable y esa es la razón por la cual las vacunas necesitan estar en una temperatura muy fría. En pocas palabras, una persona no puede ser genéticamente modificada después de recibir la vacuna.
Another question that people have, that I think is a good question is, since these vaccines were developed so quickly, is it even possible that they're safe?
Otra pregunta que muchas personas tienen es cómo la vacuna ha sido desarrollada tan rápido. ¿Es segura?
In fact, these vaccines were developed very quickly, and that was possible for two reasons. And I'm going to talk about the BioNTech vaccine now, which is similar to the Moderna one. BioNTech is the company that partnered with Pfizer, and that I was following more closely because the founders of BioNTech are two immigrant uh, um, children of immigrants to my home place, which is Germany, and they became scientists. They were children of, factory workers, but in Germany you can go to university for free, and so they were good students, and they became doctors and scientists. And they wanted, so it's interesting, read up on this couple, they're very brilliant people. So they wanted to develop vaccines against cancer.
Estas vacunas sí fueron en realidad desarrolladas muy rápido y esta tarde vamos a hablar sobre dos, que es Biotech y la de Moderna. Me voy a enfocar un poco más en la de Biotech porque tengo una conexión un poco personal a las creadores, que son hijos de inmigrantes de donde yo soy, que es Alemania. Y me interesó mucho su historia y cómo es que han llegado a trabajar para Biotech y hacer esta vacuna.
And they founded this company, BioNTech, which is like about an hour away from where I was born and where I lived.
Esta pareja de personas que crearon la vacuna, ellos se conocieron en la escuela médica y se enamoraron y están juntos. Y pues ellos asistían a la universidad que está a una hora de donde yo vivía. Entonces está un poco, lo siento un poco cercano a mí.
Right. That's where the company is, like an hour from where I'm from. Anyway, they wanted to develop vaccines against cancer. And so they decided that they were going to use mRNA as a technology because it is very flexible. It can be changed very quickly. You can change the information almost as easily as I can change ABCD in a Word file from to BCDA. So that is how easy mRNA can be changed, those instructions. And so they thought this would be a good way to develop vaccines against cancer. And they had studies on this technology and on using it to teach our immune system to fight off cancer that go back for 15 years.
Ellos querían desarrollar una vacuna en contra del cáncer y en la manera en que lo querían hacer fue usando ARN porque es fácil de manejar y de cambiar. Entonces ellos estudiaron y se especializaron en trabajar con ARN.
I don't know if this is the first vaccine that makes use of RNA or if this is something that's been in the making for a while, but because I know that, again, like we had mentioned before, like flu vaccines typically use like a weakened version of the flu, but this is entirely different in terms of like its formula. So if you could just expand on that very quickly.
Yes. So this, although the founders of BioNTech, this Turkish-German couple, were working on mRNA technology for vaccines for a long time, a decade and a half, and so were other scientists and companies. This is the first time that this has actually entered clinical practice, not just in a investigational sense, but in the sense of, we're using it. we are using it to prevent COVID in people, and that has not been done before. So in that sense, it is very new for this pragmatic application.
Para hablar un poco más sobre el uso y lo que contiene la vacuna, cómo se diferencia la vacuna de la influenza, es que sí es un poco revolucionario, ya que el ARN es muy nuevo y es muy nuevo en el uso contra el coronavirus y es en el uso de una vacuna.
Ujú. Y estaba estudiada la RNA por muchos años en varias aplicaciones, pero nunca se usó antes ahora en la realidad para proteger millones y millones de personas.
Obviously, with the vaccine rollout, there's been plans both federally and then statewide, just in terms of how the intended vaccine rollout is going to look like. I know that in Massachusetts, Governor Baker has already established sort of like almost like a three-part phase. In what ways do you think like this vaccine rollout has been successful so far, and in what ways can it be improved?
La siguiente pregunta está relacionada a la vacuna y la distribución. Como se sabe, el gobierno federal y estatal ha desarrollado planes para distribuir la vacuna a las personas, a la población. Y pues se sabe que aquí en Massachusetts, el gobernador Baker, pues su primera fase sería dar la vacuna, proveer la vacuna a doctores y a enfermeras y enfermeros. Y luego seguiría proveer la vacuna a personas con enfermedades de alto riesgo, luego siguiendo con proveer la vacuna al público en general. La pregunta para Julia en este caso es qué piensa que ha sido efectivo y exitoso sobre este plan y sobre este procedimiento.
Right. Thank you. I think that we have to take one step back and look at the whole COVID response overall. I feel strongly that protection for immigrant and Black communities has been woefully lacking. And I think the same thing is happening with the vaccines. I think that in the beginning, we had the lockdown that was effective to bring the numbers of transmission down substantially. And after that, there were things we needed to do to keep people safe and also to further reduce transmission of the virus, because other countries have actually eliminated transmission of the virus. We could have done that too. But to do that, immigrant and Black communities would have needed to be protected.
Pues analizando la respuesta que el gobierno le ha dado al coronavirus, si tomamos un paso atrás y analizamos lo que ha pasado, podemos ver que la respuesta no fue del todo efectiva, ya que la protección a inmigrantes y personas negras ha faltado. Primero queríamos reducir el número de infectados y de transmisiones, al igual que en otros países se lo estaban haciendo en su momento, pero debido a la falta de protección a inmigrantes y comunidades negras, esto no ha podido alcanzarse.
Countries like New Zealand, Taiwan, even Australia, Korea, are controlling the transmission of the virus. And that is because they are going after every single case and stopping transmission forward from every single case. Because if the virus is not continuously transmitted, it just dies out. It goes away because it cannot live on its own. It's not like a bacterium or other germs like fungi. Unless somebody is infected with it all the time, the virus just goes away.
Si miramos a otros países como lo es Nueva Zelanda, Taiwán, Australia y Corea, quienes están controlando las transmisiones, pues vemos que lo que han hecho es que han ido detrás de cada uno de los casos y han controlado el virus, porque después de que lo controlan, lo detienen, el virus muere, así que no pueden haber más transmisiones.
Mhm. Yes. So unless there's always an infected person, a new infected person, the virus goes away.
A menos que haya siempre una nueva persona infectada, el virus morirá.
Yeah, exactly. So we could have done that. And to do that, we would have had to protect people in their workplaces. And we would have had to enable people to stay safe in their homes, where people, immigrant and Black communities, were already extremely crowded at home due to high rents and previous evictions. So those were the two things that we would have needed to do that were not done. And I would specifically note in Massachusetts, there are no binding workplace regulations. So employers essentially do whatever they want. And if workers complain, there is no follow-up and there is no punishment for an employer who endangers or sickens their workers.
En Massachusetts nosotros pudimos haber controlado la transmisión
Mhm.
haciendo lo siguiente, que sería proteger a las personas en sus trabajos, proteger a las personas que se quedan en su casa, debido a que la renta es muy alta. Hay muchas personas viviendo en un mismo apartamento. Normalmente vemos eso en comunidades minoritarias, como lo son inmigrantes y como lo son personas de color. Y, por ejemplo, en los trabajos no hay ningún tipo de restricción contra el coronavirus. Normalmente puede haber algún llamado de atención debido a la falta de preocupación sobre este tema, pero no hay seguimiento a la acción.
Yeah, so if an employer violates very obvious workplace safety um, uh, measures, they do not get punished. So many employers do violate them, and many people get sick at work.
Como lo es en Massachusetts, si un empleado viola la seguridad del trabajo, muchos de ellos no reciben ningún castigo y debido a esto, muchos empleados se contagian en el trabajo.
Yes, and that is the injustice that has been fueling the spread of the virus here in Massachusetts throughout the summer. And if you look at which towns and which neighborhoods had the highest transmissions in the summer, it is the immigrant communities and the Black communities.
Estas son las injusticias en la zona de trabajo que han forzado el despliegue del coronavirus a través del verano. Y si vemos a las comunidades que han sido más afectadas, podemos notar que son las comunidades inmigrantes y las comunidades de personas de color.
And when you have a fire burning in one part of the state, and then suddenly you have more inflammatory conditions like the cold weather setting in, of course, that fire is then going to spread into the areas and towns that were more protected earlier on.
Entonces, si lo vemos como un fuego que está encendido en estas comunidades minoritarias, si hay más cosas alrededor que lo están inflamando, como lo es el clima frío, va a provocar la propagación del virus a comunidades que antes no habían sido tan afectadas.
Right. So, you know, the upper middle class white communities now are also seeing a lot of transmission from these flames that were kept burning in the immigrant communities throughout the summer.
Y como podemos ver ahora, la clase media alta de personas blancas ahora está siendo afectada por la transmisión por la propagación del virus, que es un efecto del descuido hacia las comunidades de foco alto, que fueron las comunidades inmigrantes en su momento, al igual que comunidades de personas de color.
Really, in general, like a lot of immigrants and Black communities throughout Massachusetts, as well as really in the United States in general, have been very affected deeply by the pandemic and how those struggles may have been overlooked and how they've kind of not been thought of. With this vaccine rollout, how can we avoid those missteps that we took with the overall taking care of the pandemic?
Siguiendo en esta línea sobre lo que estamos discutiendo, que es cómo el COVID-19 ha afectado a las comunidades inmigrantes y a las comunidades negras. Si pudiéramos preguntarle, Julia, ¿cómo podemos evitar tomar esos pasos de los que acabamos de hablar con esta nueva administración que será adaptada, que vendrá al gobierno el 20 de enero?
Yeah.
¿Cómo podemos, si nos puede decir un poco de sus ideas de cómo podemos remediar los errores que en el pasado cometimos para no volverlos a cometer en el control de esta pandemia?
So I think that we need to roll out the vaccine in a more just way. That, of course, is very important. Actually, Rhode Island is showing the way as opposed to Massachusetts. They are focusing on high transmission communities of frontline workers, immigrant workers like Central Falls. They are prioritizing giving the vaccine to those communities. That's not happening in Massachusetts. There's some 20% of, some slice. I think, honestly, I think that immigrant organizations themselves will have to make demands about this, because otherwise it will fall by the wayside, just like the workplace protection and the protection at home. For example, evictions have now resumed, which is the worst kind of fuel you can dump on a pandemic. So, we have to have a rollout of vaccines that prioritizes the hard-hit communities, which Massachusetts does not have. And we still have to protect people in these other ways, because the vaccine is just one slice of this Swiss cheese layer that will protect us. But the vaccine is not a stopping the pandemic like this. We need to have multiple protections in place in order to stop the pandemic, which we could do. The vaccine is a very important one, but other ones are ventilation at work, ventilations in school, masks universally, distancing universal, both at work and in school, no evictions, no foreclosures. Those would just be a few fundamental steps to slow and then stop the pandemic.
Necesitamos necesitamos proveer la vacuna en una manera más justa a comunidades, como es el caso de Rhode Island, que se está enfocando en comunidades de alta transmisión, y como podemos ver, eso no está pasando aquí en Massachusetts. Lo que pienso es que las organizaciones inmigrantes tienen que hacer demandas para que no pase como lo fue el caso de la protección en el trabajo que estábamos hablando hace un momento, o la protección en la casa. Necesitamos priorizar las comunidades que han sido golpeadas más alto por el coronavirus y proteger las personas en otras maneras también, que sería una manera de verlo como una pieza de queso suizo. necesitamos múltiples capas de protección. Y un ejemplo de esto sería ventilación en las escuelas y en el trabajo, usar mascarillas en todo momento y practicar el distanciamiento social en todo lugar, al igual que no sacar a las personas de su casa. Y esto solo para mencionar algunas de las cosas que podríamos hacer.
Yes, and that we have to do because, you may have heard about the new variant, the mutant variant of the coronavirus that was first detected in Great Britain and England, and a slightly different one in South Africa. Well, that mutant or variant is circulating in the United States as well. It is more contagious by about 50%. We also are not sure if it mutates further, whether it could even escape the protection from the vaccine. Maybe we should talk about that new variant next time. But what I'm saying is we need all these different layers of protection to slow down the spread of the virus, because the less the virus is spreading and multiplying, the less mutants can happen, the less mutants can arise. But I think the fundamental issue is good ventilation everywhere where people are, ability to stay at a distance, always wearing masks. And yes, the vaccine is very useful, and we need more justice with this offering the vaccine to people. I mean, I wouldn't want to force anyone to take it, but people need to have the offer. People in, Chelsea and Brockton and Everett and Lawrence and Springfield need to have the option to take that vaccine. And I don't think it's going to happen in a timely way without clear demands from the immigrant organizations.
También queríamos hablar un poco sobre la nueva variante de COVID que primero fue detectada en Inglaterra y una pequeña diferente versión que fue detectada en Sudáfrica, que es más contagiosa por un 50%. Si lo vemos en perspectiva comparando la versión vieja a la versión nueva, con la versión vieja contagiaríamos a un total de 10 personas. Con esta nueva versión contagiaríamos a un total de 15 personas, indicando que es más contagioso. No estamos seguros de que esta nueva versión pueda mutar más, entonces necesitamos diferentes capas de protección para detener el contagio. Necesitamos menos mutaciones de este virus para que las vacunas sean efectivas. Entonces, algo fundamental que tenemos que tener en cuenta es buena ventilación en cualquier área cerrada, mantener la distancia en cualquier lugar, usar mascarillas y también ofrecer esta vacuna a todas las comunidades, especialmente a esas comunidades que han sido afectadas más que otras, como lo son Chelsea, como lo son Brockton, como lo son Lawrence. Darle a esas personas de esta comunidad la opción, obviamente no forzarlos, pero darle la opción de que puedan tomar esta vacuna, ya que ellos han sido afectados más que los demás.
Very quickly before we go, I just wanted to extend again, thank you so much, Dr. Julia Koehler, for coming to the show and for letting us just have this great discussion about the vaccine. I know there's a lot of questions that people have, and I hope that anybody who's watching this will feel that some of them have been answered.
My pleasure. Thank you so very much for having me. I think you're performing a hugely critically important service for communities. Thank you so much for your so important work.
But please continue to keep watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay informed. Jacqueline, I don't know if you want to send us one last translation and then we'll be off.
Bueno, estamos llegando al final de esta pequeña sección de esta entrevista y queríamos agradecerle a todos por acompañarnos a este momento y gracias a la doctora Kohler por brindarnos su tiempo y sus clarificaciones. Muchas gracias por su tiempo y gracias por estar con nosotros y acompañarnos.